In this video, we're going to create a brand new custom control totally in SwiftUI to select the APR and the month duration of a loan. So we take a look at the functional version of the app. This is the app right here. We're going to build this component. It is going to behave like a collection view in traditional UI kit. It allows us to choose these different options, which then changes the way the calculation works. Now, this you could sort of see was demoed in the original design from the designer. And one of the things that you'll notice here is the colors change. So when it's selected, we see white colors. When it's not selected, we see blue and then a dark gray. And then there's this weird little subtle thing that you're seeing over on this far side of the control. And so that is a transparency effect to sort of let the user know visually that something is happening there. So I'm going to show you how we can achieve that effect using the mask property in SwiftUI in this. And we're going to build this whole thing from scratch. So we've already built this slider from scratch, wrapping up the UI slider from UIKit so that we could customize the thumbnail and the track height, because those are two things that are not possible with the default slider in SwiftUI. Now we're going to build something totally from scratch that's going to look super awesome, and it's going to be something that can have a variable number of elements, and it's just going to look great. It's really exciting. The other thing is, so that little thing that we talked about only appears if you start to scroll and there's more content on that other side. So it appears here. Once we scroll back, it's going to be hidden. Hey, what's up? My name is Paul Solt from Super Easy Apps. If you want to get access to this final code, or if you want to get access to the intermediate code that we're going to be building today, hop on over to this link. I've got the link down below. If you just go there right now, you can type your email address in here, and I will send you the code that we're working on. Now, I'm breaking this apart into multiple parts. So you've got an overall payment calculator that you can get access to, that we sort of been building up. And I've got a commit history that if you want to look at this, you can jump back in time to one of the starting points and use that to get access to the code, or you can just get the final version. I've got a demo version, and then I've got the version that we've been sort of building up. So that's kind of where we're at. And then all of the work that we're going to do for this project, I'm actually going to do in a separate little project, and then we'll pull that change in just like we did with the UI slider. So I created a custom slider where we could sort of play with different sliders. We're going to do the same type of thing right here, and then we'll bring that into our main project. So our goal is to build out this UI component, and we're going to need to start somewhere. Where do we want to start? We're probably going to start on the payment cell itself and start building that out. I'm going to work probably on one file and then sort of extract stuff as we go. That's kind of how I like to work with SwiftUI. And we can always refactor later, but there's just so much to do. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a payment cell, and this is going to be a view, and this is going to have some kind of payment, and this is going to be a payment option, and we'll call this a payment term. So that means we need some kind of data model. And so for that, we're just going to model this with a payment term. And to start off, let's, so if we're looking at that image, just make it so I can see it on one screen. So what I'm seeing is we've got 36 months, and then we've got 3.49% APR. So I'm going to do the months or the duration as an integer, and then I'm going to do the APR as a double. And then we need to do our var body, press enter, and we can get started. We're going to have a VStack that is going to have our text. In this case, let's just get a feel for it by putting in some placeholder text. That's the easiest way to sort of see something working. And then down here, how do we want to do this? So in terms of percentages, we have to divide by 100. So 3.49 divided by 100 is going to be giving us 2 decimal places in. So just think of this as being 3 out of 100. So you're going to just inset it like that in order to get the proper calculation. So that's now visible, and we want to stylize it. We also want to sort of customize it a little bit. And how do we want to start? Let's start with some of the styling, so it just starts looking visually more interesting. We're going to do foreground style. And then if it's selected, we need to have some kind of selection mechanism. So let's have let selected bool. If it's selected, we are going to use let's temporarily use blue. And then we will do dot clear or white if it's not selected. All right. Then we need a background color. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. And so here you can see that we mixed up the colors. So let's just make sure we're using white and then blue. And then let's make this one false. Okay, so we're sort of being able to sort of see what these look like just to get more styled. Let's do a HStack. Sorry. Wrong place for the HStack. Right here is where I want the HStacks that were side by side. So we can sort of see what this is starting to look like. 36 needs to be way chunkier, so let's make it chunky by making it bold. That's going to look a lot better. And then I think we'll keep that font for right now. The other one, we're going to have to adjust the font and change the styling. So the foreground style on the other one, if we look, it's a dark gray and then it's a white. If it's selected, otherwise, let's go with color.secondary. And so we now can see that, and it's too big. So what we're going to have to do is some other font. So I'm just going to go with caption. And again, you can organize where you select these. Let's try caption. We could try caption 2. See if we like one versus the other. It feels a little too small, so I'm going to go with this one. And I'm also going to increase the font weight. And let's go with medium, just to make it a little bit chunkier. Cool. Next, what we need is some padding before we add the background. So let's go ahead and do padding. And here, I'm probably going to just do horizontal to start. And let's go with something like 14. It looks approximately right. And then in terms of the overall height, I think that's going to be dependent on like the control itself. So I'm not going to specify that right now. Maybe we do want, let's just see what it looks like. Let's set the height down here and see what happens. To make it fill, so I'm setting a height, but I don't know how tall I want it. What we're going to do here is we're going to use the ability to make this sort of fill the extra space. So I'm going to just do frame and then max height, and we're going to do dot infinity. So it's going to push it out, and so now we can see that it's filling up. Previously, if we had done a background, what we would have seen without this, let me take that out. I put that in the wrong spot. There we go. So previously it was not pushing out, and so we want to give it some outward pressure, and so we'll do this dot infinity to push it outwards to make it fill that full region. So that's typically how I work. Now we've got some padding, we've got some coloring. The color doesn't look exactly accurate, but I think this one's a little, I don't know. It might be a little bit too dark. This is the secondary color. I'd prefer to stick to the secondary, I think. We could always make it a little bit chunkier to make it darker. Let me think about it. I think I like how it is. So that's a good styling for our cell. So that's the pressed selected state, and this is the unselected state. Okay, so that's the first part of this. The next thing that we need to do is we actually have to create a selection mechanism and do some fun stuff with scrolling and some payment terms and content. Where do we start? We're going to need some test data. So we're going to need some information that we can pass in that's going to represent a whole slew of elements. We could set that up in the preview. We could extract some of this to just preview this. So if we wanted to, I'll show you a trick in here. If it likes me, it doesn't appear to like me. We're missing SwiftUI. Okay, so we pasted this in. We created our new payment cell. I mainly pulled this out because I wanted to do the preview outside of the other one, just to get started with that. And then there's this traits attribute, and it wasn't coming up because I hadn't imported SwiftUI. So traits allows us to do a size that fits layout. And if I can fix the other compiler error. So this won't show up on this view. That's the interactive view. But if you switch over to this view, you get a much more concise UI. So sometimes it's helpful if you want to just sort of compare, like, what does this little widget look like and how is it going to behave? That's one way that you can do this. And we could also try changing some of the data. So we could set the data here so it's like 48 months. And then in here, we could do 3.74. So then if we update our preview, oh, we're not pulling in the information. Great thing that we caught this. There's still some work to do here. So for this, we need to display the payment in months. So payment.months. And we see that has now updated. And then the next thing is formatting a percentage here. We're going to, again, use the format specifier here to do this type of calculation so that it's locale specific. And that's going to be payment.apr, comma, format. And then there is a percent option. And this is one of the reasons why we, so if you had typed this wrong as 3.74, you're going to see that that's going to be 374%. So to get that to format correctly, we have to divide by 100, which is what we have done here. Cool. So that is our little widget. That's how we can sort of see them. And that's non-interactive mode. Once we switch to this mode, it's going to always show the full UI with the preview. So jumping back to our content view, in here, we're going to start getting ourselves set up for the actual selection mechanism and all of the work that that's going to entail. So let's get some payment term options that we can pass into a selector object. So struct PaymentSelector. There's going to be a view. And then what we want in here is a set of terms. I'm going to have it so that we can potentially change it later on. So this is going to be our payment term. This is what we want to visualize in the UI. And then we've got our body as well. Okay, and we need to return something. So let's build this out. Now, we want them to be interactive, so we want a button that allows us to select things. We're going to have to work with indices in order to keep track of which item is selected. So one of the things we're going to want is a var binding. And this is going to be our selected index into whatever the collection is. We can default this to some value when we pass it in. And then we can pass in our options, and let's just get this to compile by putting an empty text. And we will get rid of this. To keep things simple, I am just going to create a state property down here, which is going to be our selected index. That's going to be an int, and that's going to equal to 0. And then we're going to have our var payment terms, and this is going to be a array of payment terms. We get months and a APR. So based on what we see here, I'm just going to start pulling in some values. So 36 and then 0.0349. It's going to be our first one. We'll copy and paste this and just start modifying it. So we've got 36 months. Let's go with 48, 60, 72. That's going to be 5 years. So let's do one more than that, and let's bump it up so it's bigger number. It's going to be 144. And if we wanted one more, it would be better to have these in years, but I'll just do one more. We are missing commas here, so let's go ahead and insert those commas. I forgot that. And then we're going to adjust the APR with each of these sort of step up. So it's 74, 99, 424. We'll go for, let's go 5, 6. And then we'll go 5, 9, 3. Okay. And this will just double one more time. So this will be 2, 8, 8. Cool. So we've got some new values. This is going to be an integer type. And next up, we're going to see our text, which is great. We don't have any logic yet to show anything, but we at least are showing our preview. Our next step is to start visualizing this information. So how can we do that? Well, we can use let's use a LazyHStack. And do we need to do any kind of alignment or spacing? We're going to do a spacing of 0. I don't know what it just did there, but that's not what we want. Let's try this again. LazyHStack. I want this one. I want the spacing 0. I'll just write it myself. It's faster than the autocomplete. Next up, we are going to do a ForEach, and we're going to be iterating over our list and pulling out one element at a time using the indices, so the index of each element. So we're going to go to our payment options, which I just called it options. That's probably not the best name. Let's call this payment terms, just to be a little bit more clear. And then we're going to iterate over payment terms dot indices. This is going to be a list of all the valid indices in ascending order. And the ID is just going to be the number itself. So whatever index we're at. And then we're going to open this up, index in, there we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create a button because we want user interaction. This is going to have an action, and there's going to be a label. And the button action, we want to change the selected index. So selected index is equal to the current index that we are on, that we're rendering. So this index becomes the new index. And then in terms of the label, we're going to use that payment cell that we created. And we can use the index to get the payment term. So payment terms at the index is going to give us the payment for this specific cell. And then the selection state, we can say, well, is the selected index equal to the current index that we're on? Whoa. Okay. So our UI element is really filling out the space. And maybe this is where we do want to have, I think to achieve one of the effects that I did, I'm going to leave it this way, but we are going to need a height. We're going to pass in the height. Okay, so that's how we're going to do this. So var height, this is going to be a CG float, and we'll set this equal to 60. So there's a default value. And then down here at the bottom, we're going to do something like height. So frame.height is going to equal that height. Great. Okay, so one of the things that you're going to see is we can click on these things. Oh, and it's actually changing. Excellent. I cannot swipe it. So what do we need to be able to swipe it? We need to use a scroll view that's horizontal. So let's go ahead and grab the scroll view that has axis, And we're going to do horizontal. I'm just going to delete the rest because it never seems to autocomplete properly. And I'm going to make sure that our frame is applied to the scroll view itself. And so now we have the beginnings of this. If I want it to show the indicator or not show the indicator, I need to modify that and just say false. And now when we swipe, you're not going to see that bar underneath. If I had said true, then we're going to see that bar underneath. So we don't want that. That's going to make this effect look weird. It's going to look like a web page. Cool. All right. So that's super fun. Next thing, what we need is a separator. So the design over here has this separator. And one of the things I'm trying to do with this control is I want to have an outline. And you can look at this design. I don't know if I can zoom in here. I guess there is an outline on it. But I wanted, I feel like not showing the separator when it's selected might look better and more clean. And that's kind of the effect. That could just be, I can't tell if that's blue. It does look like you see the separator on the top and the bottom. And that was one of the things that I was playing around with trying to hide. But let's bring that back up so we can see the full thing. I don't know why Zoom in this Pixelmator app is not as intuitive as I would expect. Okay, so I need a drink. We want to do the separator, and there's a divider UI element that we can use. And to just see something working quickly, for each of the elements where we're creating a button, let's go ahead and show the divider. And do I need to set the color? Oh, I might need to set the size. It doesn't know how to display. So let's do the width. And for this, let's do line width. And then for the height, let's just do 40 just to see something. And then we need to set a color. So we need some kind of outline color. And I'm going to set that here, var outline color. I think a color with white. This is something we can move into our colors, but let's go with the color white and then 0.7. Okay, so now we finally see the divider. That took a lot. So let's get this outline color over. Oh, actually, that's why we had to do it here. We're doing this component separate from everything else right now, so we don't have access to any of our colors yet. That's fine. We'll just leave this as is. So that's our divider with the outline color. Now, I don't want to display it. You can see it right here. I have to zoom in here. You can see that it's putting that like divider there, and we could display it. It just looks a little bit weird to me. So what I want to do is I want to not show it. And let's look at the very end. You see how there's a divider at the very end? We don't want that last divider. So we're going to have some logic to control when this divider gets shown. And so we're going to say if index is less than the payment terms dot count -1, we'll show this divider. So this first step, we need a space on that minus. So this first step should take care of that trailing, which it does. And next, what I want to do is basically just make it a clear if you don't show it at all, you're going to see everything shift left or right as you're selecting things, which is going to look weird. And we can probably see what that looks like if we want to. So I'm going to have another option in here and say, let show divider equal, and then say selected index is not equal to index. And then for here, if we did an inner just for fun, you're going to see it has now gone away. If I make the line width a little bit bigger, oh, it's, do I need to modify the one on the other side? Okay. It's noticeable now once I added this second condition. So the condition that we're trying to do is when it's selected, I just don't want to show a divider on this side, and I don't want to show a divider on this side. And so by having this condition of checking the current slider and the one before it, that allows us to not show it. But as we go further and further over, it's going to offset the elements. And you're going to notice this jarring effect. And so to get around that, you have to do something different. So we don't want to use an if statement here. Instead, we want to keep the size the same, but we want to play with opacity. Opacity is probably the easiest way to not show something. So if show divider, we are going to use whatever our default color is going to be, which is going to be our outline color. Otherwise, we are going to go with clear. And so this should, I messed something up. We're missing a, you can get some gnarly, when working with scroll views or any of these things with a ForEach, sometimes if you're missing something, it can turn it so that it doesn't compile properly. So let's try and figure out what is going on. I'm going to select everything and do Control-I to indent to see if that helps me figure it out. It does not. But I think what our problem, we shouldn't need to have a VStack in here. I've obviously done something incorrect. So let's take this line out. And it compiles. Put it back in. Oh. Opacity does not take parameters like this. That is our total problem. It's our foreground style. Is it a background style? In my notes, I have it as background. Oh. Okay. Right here is the problem. I am just passing in the outline color. Here is where I need to have show divider. And if we show the divider, we do the outline color. Otherwise, we do .clear. And I don't know why I'm doing it that way. Does this not work? Apparently not. Okay, so documentation is not entirely clear, but this is how I had it working before. And now we can sort of see UI is not shifting around as we move. And let's set our line width back to 1. Save that. It's going to shift things around initially, but once we start clicking, we don't see those dividers. So if we zoom in and we're looking at this, we shouldn't see the divider here. We should only see it there. Okay, so next up, we've got to connect the divider with the outline. And then we're going to have to extend our height to whatever the height is going to be. So we're going to match our height to bring this divider up. I'm not using opacity here. If the divider overlaps with the other value on the outline, you're going to notice that the two colors are going to mix. We don't want that effect, so I'm going to go with a single color. But this is already starting to take shape, which is super awesome. To get the next effect, let's go ahead and add a background. So where are we down here? So we've got our frame height. We are going to need background. And then for this, I'm going to do a rounded rectangle. And then we're going to give it a corner radius. And let's add a property up top. And for this one, I think something like 5 or 4 should be good. The corner radius, I think, is a little bit different on this control. Let's pull it up since we can't see it right now. It's pretty similar. It might even be less. So it could be like a 3. It's up to you how you want to do this. Okay, and we're going to see, I think I did a clear color on the background of the unselected state. So let's check our payment cell and see what we did there. We did do a clear color. So if we did, I don't know if background's an option here. Oh, I'm doing clear there. Interesting. So instead of clear, we're going to do okay, so we'll just match the system background and that should make that disappear. So if you didn't catch what I did here, I changed the background to use UI color.system background. This gives us access to like the background property, but that only is available in the background attribute for the top level. It's not actually available on color. And so in order to get it in this control, rather than using the clear color, because when we use clear, it was just coming through incorrectly and we don't want that. So this way we're using the current system background so that if we were trying to do light and dark mode, we should see that this would behave like we expect. We're going to have that dark background behind, and everything is still looking pretty good, which is nice. Okay, so that's setting that up. What else do we have to do is the outline. So the outline, we're going to set up a background attribute, and we are going to do a rounded rectangle so we can see that it's rounded. It might help to add some padding here so that we can see the edges. So let's go ahead and do that. That's going to inset this a little bit, and we're going to want to do that corner radius. So we've got this rounded rectangle as the background. That's why it went black. Okay, that's why it went black. I totally missed that. we didn't necessarily need to do the other change, but it was because of this change that caused it. And we are going to do the line width one for the stroke. So we're going to stroke the outside with the current line width that we've set. So we're reusing that same property. And I have a spelling mistake here. Once we do that, that's going to give us our line width, and it's stroking it, and we're going to give it the foreground color. Oh, okay, this makes a lot more sense. That's why I didn't have that before. And this one's going to be our outline color. Okay, so that's working, but we're having this artifact where our corner radius is now being impacted. And I think we have to add some clipping. And this is where we need a corner radius shared. So to get the same thing, we're going to reuse that same corner radius, and that's going to clip our content views. Without this, it's a little hard to see. What you see is the blue is kind of going outside the bounds. And if we go here and select the next one, the white is going through that corner. So to fix that, corner radius is going to clip our content. So we turn corner radius on. It now clips this content view of the cell to fit within the bounds. And as we move between blue and the white, we'll see that that's going to give us the correct corner radius. So that is how we can customize that. We have it selectable so that we can do all of this. Oh, that's an artifact. And this is why maybe we do want that background to be clear. Or we just have to make our content insets. So one way to do that, we could try this approach. We could set the frame height equal to the height that we're passing in minus the line width times 2 and see what that gives us. Apparently nothing. Somehow that messed up our ForEach. I don't think I like this approach, so I'm not going to do it. So let's get rid of this. So I'm just looking at how I'm visualizing it, and the reason I went for the other approach is I was trying to get the outline to not appear, and maybe we need a line width of 2. I don't remember. I think I did 1, but let's just see what 2 looks like. So we can make this look a little bit better. So if I did an overlay, we would see this drawn on top of this. And I didn't like this effect, so you can just barely see it, but there's an outline on the blue. And I really want the blue to sort of pop and come more to the foreground by being on top and being the same height as whatever our stroke width is. And I don't know. I don't know if we can control the inside outsideness of the stroke. So my workaround when I did this was to make that payment cell transparent. So let's make this transparent again and see if the original issue that we had goes away. So let's do .clear. And then the divider was initially .clear, but it was because we had done the rectangle that it got messed up. And so that's looking better to me. So the blue, there's still a little bit bleed through, but I like this effect better. And if we make the line width 1, it should be very slight. So that the blue basically extends to top and bottom of wherever the outline ends. And then when it's outlined, you see that effect. So that's kind of the effect that I'm going for in this. And this is something that you just got to play it by ear, but this is the style that I want. All right, so we now have the ability to select stuff. This is like super functional. Let's get rid of this because that's going to mess things up. We don't want that anymore. And I'll go back into our payment cell. We're going to get rid of this ending. So I can do D and then $. This will delete to the end of the line using the Vim keyboard shortcuts, which I have enabled. Awesome. So that is our payment selector working in action. And the next thing that we need to do is that masking effect. And then that's going to require some logic. I think that's the last thing that we need to do. I think we're pretty much in a good spot. In our preview, we could do a on change event just so that we can sort of see what's happening. And we can pass in the selected index. And this is how we can print selected the new value. So if we got the previews enabled down in the bottom and we start clicking on this, you'll see the selection index switch between all of these. So that's super fun. This also means that we could default to maybe this third element. So it's 0 base. And so we can pre-select that one on the previews anytime we make change. So if I save it and do a Control Option P, that will re-render preview and start it at index 2. Okay. So this has really come together. It's a usable component. We can definitely integrate it. The last thing I want to do is that custom mask effect. And now this one's going to be an interesting trick. So let's go ahead and hook that up. We are going to need to use the scroll geometry change method. And we're going to be checking 2 conditions. We're going to be checking if we're at the beginning and we're going to be checking if we're at the end. Using this effect, I don't know if I can combine these into one. This is a new API for me. I'm used to working in UIKit for this type of thing. So this one's kind of a funky API. It's not really documented well when I was looking at it before. Let's see if we can pull open the documentation. Nice. Are we in the wrong? Oh, there's so many options. How about scroll view? Okay. Good thing is Xcode has not been crashing like before, so I'm really appreciating that. Bad news is Xcode documentation is super gnarly to search. I don't understand why this isn't. So what's really weird about this API is you pass it a type, and then you have to return that type. So we have to turn this into if this is bool, we have to turn this into a Boolean expression. And then down here, this is the action. You get the before and the after, I think. I don't know why there's two. It should be like the previous and the next. Old value. So this, we do want to be careful because any work we do in this is going to get called a lot for all of the drag events. So don't do anything super gnarly. And let's go ahead and get it integrated. So I think we're going to do Boolean expressions. We could do double and we could return values, but I need to know if we are going to show the mask on the left or if we're going to show the mask on the right. And so we're going to be deciding based on some conditions here. I don't know if there's a way to do this for both. I'd have to return a non-bool value, which could be an array of bools, which would be weird, or a I'm going to do them separately. This is just such a weird way of writing a method. I'm still perplexed that this exists in this fashion, but maybe this is the easiest way to do it in SwiftUI. So for this first one, all we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at this geometry object, and this has a lot of different interesting parameters in it. And what we care about in this instance is we're trying to determine if when I'm swiping, and of course I've broken it, if the content offset is past 0. So typically when we first start, it's going to be set to 0. And so we're going to look for one of the content things, and we've got an offset. If you are familiar with the UI scroll view APIs, that's going to tell us exactly how far in the content we are. And so we're going to use that content offset. And we're going to say, if this value is anything other than 0, so if it's greater than 0, then we know that we've scrolled. And then for sanity check, let's just print scroll new value. Then we need our end. And so if we go ahead with this, we can now build. And what we should see is a Boolean. So if we're here, X is actually going to be negative. And this is really hard to see. So let's actually print out the values in here. Okay, and in doing that, because we now have 2 lines in here, we need to do a return statement here. Okay, so that should be building again. And if we drag, you can now see that we're going in the negative direction. So anytime we go all the way here, our content offset becomes negative. We let go, it snaps back to 0. Once we start dragging this way, we have a positive content offset. And so what we're first trying to do is figure out, should we show the UI element on the left? And the answer is no. And then right here, yes, because we're pushing content off screen. So if we comment this out, that's going to make this so that we can see what's the answer. And so in this case, we want to show it because we've met that condition. Now to show it, we're going to have to do a little bit of magic, and we're going to have a parameter called fade leading and fade trailing. I'll default them both to false. And then down here, we're going to say fade leading is equal to whatever this is going to be. So it's going to be our new value. And we have to make these both state properties. Okay. So now we're flipping a bit, but we're not actually leveraging that. So to leverage that, we're going to use the mask, and we're going to have to build up a horizontal elements. So we're going to have HStack with a spacing of 0 because we don't want any issues with the spacing. And here it's color or no color that's going to determine visibility. So we could say if fade leading, then we're going to, and I wonder what the best way to show this. Let's go with a rectangle to start. And let's just make this transparent. So let's do the foreground style. Clear. Then we're going to have a rectangle in the center. And this is going to be a foreground style of black. And then we're going to have another condition for the trailing. The other thing that we're going to have to do is we have to control the size of this. So let's do a frame width and set this to maybe 30 as a good starting point. And so now it's totally clear. So let's go with black.opacity, and then let's do 0.5. Okay, so that kind of works. There's going to be a single color value. The other thing we could do is, and then if we go back and select it, so let's do this, we see that effect. So that's a jarring effect on the content. And so this is where a linear gradient would help us go from totally clear to some kind of opacity. And that would make this effect not look so gnarly. So to do that, we're going to change out rectangle for linear gradients. And I'm going to go for all of these. The colors that we're going to work with are going to be from a white of 50%, or it could be, I guess it could be black. It has to be color. It's the absence of color that makes things disappear. So when we're working with black, this is fully opaque. So we'll see all the content in the center. We made this 30 wide, so that's the only region that is going to be affected right now. And so in terms of our colors, we need to start from missing color to color. So let's do color.black, and then we'll do opacity, and 0.5 is a good starting point. And then we'll do a color.black. As long as we have a fully opaque color, that's going to work with our mask layer. And then our start point, this is dot leading to dot ending or trailing. So what direction is the gradient? Now, if we swipe over, we can see that we've now softened that effect. We've made it so that it is fading more on the left. If you went to full opacity, it would start to really fade out, but that it's too much. It just doesn't look good. And that's partially because it's leading a linear gradient. So making it a little bit more subtle makes it so that it's not overwhelming, and it still gets to the point that there is content that's kind of like going backwards and it's going into the ground, is kind of how I would liken this effect. So it's sort of disappearing. And this should work in both dark and light mode, so we can play with the dark and light appearance. So let's go to dark appearance. And you'll see that it starts to fade out. So this, it actually looks like it's going underground because of the way we've done the outline and the black background. Cool. Next up, we've got to do the other condition. Now, this one's a little bit trickier. Okay, so we don't need this print statement anymore. We'll clean that up. So right now we have the on-scroll geometry change. Next up, we're going to do the same style of thing. Let's go ahead and set this up for what it needs to be. And before we do the if statement, let's just get it in there so that we can see the effect and we can see it is applying here. So here we have the flip-flop things. And I think we should just be able to change the trailing to leading. And if we select this, so that gives us that nice effect there. And now we just want to conditionally show it. So if this is the last element, I don't want to see it if I'm all the way over. If there's more elements, I want to see it. And then we'll animate this to then make it so that it's not a jarring effect when it comes on. Let's bring this up so it's not at the bottom of the screen. And we don't need that return statement since we got rid of the print. So let me just clean that up on line 65. Okay, so the thing that's going to be the hardest here is understanding the relationship of how to get this to work. Oh, okay. So what we're going to have to do is calculate. Let me see if I can diagram this. So our content size is going to look something like this. And then we have to display it in a rectangle that's going to look something like this. Let's actually get rid of this, do this. And so this window here is going to be sort of scrolling through our content. I still need the fill so I can grab it. Okay, so we're going to be scrolling through our content with that slider. And what we need to do is calculate the, if I can do an arrow, I want to calculate what's the maximum offset. And then we know that if we are at that maximum offset that we stop showing it. So that's kind of the thought process. We need to figure out what that is. So we've got the content size. The other thing that we have here is our container size is what we'll be working with. And then what we're trying to figure out is what's that max offset. So that's kind of the things that we're going to be working with. So container size is going to show us if we are just putting the, I think the container over here, what is that max offset actually going to be, which is right here. And then if we get to that position for we'll compare in this case, we want to look at if the content offset.x is less than or equal to the max offset -1. We need a little bit of a margin here. Otherwise, we'll only see it when we're pulling and tugging on the view. So we're going to do something like this. So if this condition is true, that's what we're trying to build up. Then we know that we've gotten all the way to the end here, and we're at the very end, so we don't want to show that effect. So let's see if we can type that out. Let's do the max offset is equal to the geometry dot, and then we're looking at the content size. So how much content are we showing? We've got all these months, and we're going to go for the width minus the geometry dot container size, which is how big is it on screen, and we're going to grab the width there. So that's what the maximum offset would be. And then our condition that we need to solve for is going to be with the return, the max offset. I'll write it like I had written it. So geometry.contentOffset.x is greater than or equal to, or sorry, less than or equal to our max offset -1. And doing so, let's check it. So we expect to see it right now, which we do. It's very subtle. Then we get to the very end. We select this. You see it's full bleed, full color. If I just move it a little bit, we see it comes back. See how it turns on and off. Now we don't want that flashing effect. So to get rid of that, we're going to have to do some work. If we don't have this -1, what we get when we swipe all the way to the end and tap on it is it's still there, but it disappears as soon as we go past. So we see it goes away, but when it resets, it's right on the border. Let me just double check something here. I mean, that looks more straightforward to me. Okay, it didn't even need that. We just need a less than. Okay. That simplifies this a lot. I don't know why I put that there. Actually, I do. ChatGPT helped me figure out that math because I could not think yesterday. Okay, so that's how we want to think about this. That will give us that cool effect. And now the last piece of this puzzle is we want to animate those effects. So how do we do that? One other thing, when those effects are showing, I should still be able to click. So we want to make sure that that view, actually, no, that's not an issue for the mask. So we don't even have to worry about that. That's only if you're doing an overlay. So totally in the clear on the mask approach. All right, so the next thing is to just animate it. And right here, what we're going to do is on the animation, I'm going to do spring, and value is going to be what's going to be queuing it, and it's only when fade leading. We're going to do the same type of thing down here, so it's just going to be animation dot spring. It's choosing the wrong one, so let's make sure we're using the value and then fade trailing. Save that, rerun our preview. And now it's still a little abrupt. but it's not like it was before. So if we turn off the animation, and let's compare and contrast, select this one. It's punchy, but it's not as quick. You could always play with the animation here. So if we just did ease in, out, I think we are might have to restructure this a little bit. Okay. I think I've almost figured it out. There we go. Okay, we cannot use this if, I realized that after the fact, we cannot use this if statement because what's going to happen is the view hierarchy is changing. What we have to do is we have to keep the view hierarchy in the same spot. So we need this linear gradient always there, but what we're going to do is we're going to play with that opacity of how much gets masked. And so once you swipe it there, we're going to get that effect. So that's the spring animation. It's pretty quick. What we were seeing was if we do linear, it's probably going to look like garbage, but might be okay. I think spring is always going to look better. We could do an ease in. I think I like that the best. Okay, so we fixed that one. Let's fix this one. And then in here, it's going to be fade trailing. Otherwise, we want 1. So opacity of 1, remember, when we're fully opaque, meaning we're not transparent, then we see everything. So we want to have a little bit of transparency here, but we want to see everything here since we haven't scrolled. Once we scroll, we get that. If we come to the end, we're going to see it's fully opaque. At the very end, as soon as we scroll, we should see it animate on. Okay, so we fixed that issue. That's super cool. This is our mask layer. This allows us to basically make it so that we match that design that the designer gave us in the beginning. So all we're trying to do is get this little effect. And so that was a lot of work for a little effect, but that's how you do it. That's the payment selector. I think we're ready to integrate it in our next video. I know this was a lot. Hopefully this was helpful. If you want to get access to the code, you can jump on over to the link down below and you can get access to the code. And then from there, you can continue building this application. So thanks so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. If you have any questions, comment down below, and have a great day.